The planet had been dead for 12,000 years. Its cities stood silent under a pale violet sky. Great towers of crystal reached up from the ground like the bones of giants. The streets were empty. The buildings were empty. Everything was frozen in time, as if the people who lived there had simply vanished in a single moment and never returned. The Galactic Consortium had found this world 5,000 years ago. They called it Varanthos, after the ancient species that had built the cities. The Varanthi had been the most advanced civilization the galaxy had ever known. They had traveled between stars when other species were still learning to make fire. They had built machines that could bend space and time. And then, without any warning, they had disappeared. No one knew why. There was no sign of war, no sign of disease, no sign of any disaster at all. The Varanthi had simply stopped existing, and their empty cities remained behind like a question that no one could answer. Lieutenant Commander Daniel Harris stood at the window of the research vessel. Endurance and watched the planet turn slowly below. He was a tall man with tired eyes and a quiet face. He had been in space for 15 years, and he had seen many strange things. But something about Varanthos made him feel small in a way he could not explain. "Beautiful, is it not?" said a voice behind him. Harris turned to see Dr. Catherine Moore walking toward him. She was the lead scientist on this mission, a woman in her 50s with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had spent her entire career studying the Varanthi, and this was her 20th trip to the dead planet. "It looks sad to me," Harris said. "All those empty buildings. All that silence." Moore nodded slowly. "The consortium has sent over 200 expeditions here. The Thyrani spent 3 centuries trying to understand their technology. The Velix claim to have translated some of their language. But no one has ever figured out what happened to them, and no one has ever managed to enter the throne chamber." Harris had read about the throne chamber in the mission briefing. It was a massive dome at the center of the capital city made of black material that seemed to swallow light. Every species in the consortium had tried to open it. The Thyrani had used cutting tools for 19 days straight, without leaving a single mark. The Velix had tried prayers and rituals. The Kethari, who could walk through solid walls, had reported that the dome did not exist in any dimension they could reach. "Why do you think we will succeed where everyone else failed?" Harris asked. Moore smiled slightly. "Because humans have never truly tried. When Varanthos was first discovered, we were considered too primitive to be worth including. By the time the consortium accepted us as equals, they had already given up on the chamber. But I have a theory." She pulled out a small device from her pocket. It looked like a simple metal disc with a blinking light. "The Varanthi left behind fragments of poetry," Moore explained. "Most of it makes no sense, but one phrase appears again and again in their writings. It translates roughly as, 'The door opens for those who carry fire in their souls.'" Harris frowned. "That could mean anything. Yes. But think about what makes humans different from other species. The Thyrani are logical and patient. The Velix are spiritual and peaceful. The Kethari have evolved beyond physical form. But humans?" Moore's eyes gleamed. "Humans are stubborn. We do not accept limits. We climb mountains because they are there. We cross oceans because we want to see what is on the other side. We look at the impossible and treat it as a personal insult." She held up the device. "This reads biological signatures. Every other species has tried to open the chamber using their own patterns as a key, but no human has ever made the attempt. I believe that is exactly what the Varanthi were waiting for." Harris looked at the device, then back at the planet below. He thought about the 12,000 years of silence, the hundreds of failed expeditions, the greatest mystery in the galaxy, sitting there in the darkness, waiting. "When do we leave?" he asked. The shuttle landed in a broad plaza near the center of the capital city. Harris led the ground team, 6 soldiers, 2 engineers, and more with her research assistants. They walked through streets that had not felt footsteps in millennia. The buildings around them were made of a glass-like material that shimmered faintly in the violet light. There was no dust anywhere. No signs of decay. The city looked exactly as it must have looked on the day the Varanthi vanished. Harris found this more disturbing than any ruin he had ever explored. Ruins felt natural, This felt wrong, like a moment frozen in amber. The throne chamber rose before them as they approached the city center. It was even larger than the images had suggested, a dome of absolute blackness that seemed to drink in everything around it. Harris felt something stir in his chest as he looked at it. Not quite fear. Something older and deeper than fear. "Atmospheric readings are normal," reported Sergeant Patricia Cole, checking her scanner. "No radiation, no toxins. It is safe." "Safe is a strong word," Moore muttered. She was already walking toward the dome, her equipment floating behind her on anti-gravity platforms. The entrance was a seamless wall of black material. Moore stopped a few meters away and began setting up her equipment. Harris watched as she calibrated the device, her hands moving with the careful precision of someone who had waited her entire life for this moment. "If this does not work," Moore said quietly, "I want you to know that I am grateful you gave me the chance to try."
Harris
Nodded. "And if it does work?" Moore looked at him with an expression he could not read. "Then everything changes." She pressed her palm against the wall. For a long moment, nothing happened. The black surface remained still and cold. Harris heard someone behind him shift nervously. He was about to speak when he noticed something. The wall was glowing. The light spread outward from Moore's hand like ripples in dark water. Patterns began to emerge from the blackness, geometric shapes that seemed to move and breathe. The glow grew brighter and brighter until Harris had to shield his eyes. And then, the sound like a whisper, the wall opened. Moore stumbled backward, her face pale with shock. Where the seamless black surface had been, there was now a doorway. It was tall and arched, and beyond it lay a passage that descended into darkness so complete that their lights could not penetrate it. It worked. Moore breathed. After 12,000 years, it actually worked. Harris stared at the opening. He thought about all the species that had tried and failed. All the centuries of effort, all the theories and tools and prayers that had accomplished nothing, and then a human had pressed her hand against the wall, and the door had opened. He did not know what waited in the darkness below. He did not know what the Varanthi had left behind, or why they had chosen humanity to find it. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. The universe had just changed forever. "Stay close," he said to his team, "and stay alert. We do not know what we are walking into." He stepped through the doorway and began to descend into the darkness. Behind him, the others followed, their footsteps echoing in the silence of 12,000 years. The throne was waiting. The passage went down for what felt like hours. Daniel. Harris walked at the front of the group, his weapon raised, his helmet light barely cutting through the darkness ahead. The walls around them were made of the same black material as the dome above, smooth and cold to the touch. There were no markings, no decorations, nothing to suggest what might be waiting at the end. Catherine Moore walked close behind him, her eyes fixed on the scanner in her hands. The device was picking up energy readings that she had never seen before. Something was alive down here. Something was waiting. How much further? Sergeant Patricia Cole asked from the back of the group. Her voice echoed strangely in the narrow passage. "The scanner shows a large open space about 200 meters ahead," Moore replied. "That must be the chamber itself." Harris said nothing. He kept walking, one step at a time, deeper and deeper into the heart of the dead planet. He could feel the weight of the stone above him, the pressure of 12,000 years of silence. Whatever the Varanthi had hidden down here, they had wanted it to stay hidden until the right moment. And somehow, that moment was now. The passage opened suddenly into a vast chamber. Harris stopped at the entrance, his breath catching in his throat as he took in what lay before him. The chamber was enormous. Its ceiling disappeared into darkness far above, and its walls curved away in all directions like the inside of a sphere. Faint lights glowed along the walls, casting pale shadows across the floor. And at the center of it all, raised on a simple platform, stood the throne. It was not what Harris had expected. He had imagined something grand, something covered in gold and jewels, something that showed off the power of the civilization that had built it. But the throne was simple. It was a single chair made of white material, with no decorations at all. It looked almost ordinary, but floating above the throne was something that was anything but ordinary. A sphere of light hung in the air, its constantly shifting and changing, its colors flowing like water. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Harris felt drawn to it, as if it was calling to something deep inside him. Varanthe Cormore whispered. Her voice was filled with awe. Their central processing system, their records said it was destroyed when they disappeared. But it has been here all along. She took a step forward, then another. Harris reached out to stop her, but before he could speak, the sphere pulsed with brilliant light, and then a voice filled the chamber. It did not come from any particular direction. It seemed to come from everywhere at once, from the walls and the floor and the air itself. It spoke in no language that Harris recognized, yet he understood every word perfectly. As if the meaning was being placed directly into his mind. You have come. After so long, you have finally come. Moore stopped in her tracks. The rest of the team raised their weapons, though Harris knew that guns would be useless against whatever this was. We are explorers, Moore said, her voice shaking slightly. We come in peace. We only want to understand. We know why you have come. The voice was calm, neither warm nor cold. It simply was. We have been watching your species since you first looked at the stars and wondered what was out there. We have been waiting for you. Why us? Harris asked. He stepped forward to stand beside Moore. Why not the Thyrany or the Velox? They have been trying to enter this chamber for thousands of years, because they are finished. The sphere pulsed gently as it spoke. They reached their highest point long ago. They are what they will always be. But your kind is different. You are still growing, still changing. You burn with a fire that refuses to go out. Harris felt a chill run down his spine. What do you want from us? We want nothing from you. We want to give you something. The sphere began to glow brighter, and the chamber trembled slightly. We are the Varanthe. 12,000 years ago, we reached the end of our journey. We learned everything there was to learn about this universe. And then we moved on, to a place beyond physical existence. But before we left, we built this chamber. We stored all of our knowledge, all of our technology, all of our power in this place, and we waited for a species that was worthy to inherit it. Moore's face had gone completely white. You are offering us your inheritance? Everything you ever created? Yes. The voice seemed almost gentle now. The throne is the key. When one of you sits upon it, the inheritance will transfer. Your species will gain access to everything we left behind. The secrets of the universe itself. Harris looked at the simple white chair. It seemed so ordinary, so harmless. But he understood now that it was the most powerful object in the galaxy. Why did the door only open for humans? He asked. Why could no other species enter? Because none of them carried the fire. The sphere's colors shifted, forming patterns that might have been memories. The Thyrany are logical. They approach problems with patience and reason. The Velox are spiritual. They seek harmony and peace. The Kethri have evolved beyond physical concerns. They exist in multiple dimensions at once. All of them are remarkable in their own ways. But none of them burn. The voice paused. Humans are different. You are young. You are foolish. You make mistakes again and again, but you never stop trying. You look at walls and you try to break through them. You look at mountains and you climb them. You look at the impossible and you say, why not? Harris thought about Earth. He thought about all the wars and disasters and struggles that had marked human history. He thought about all the times people had been told that something could not be done, and had done it anyway. That is the fire we were looking for. The voice grew softer. That is what makes you worthy. Moore turned to Harris. Her eyes were wide, her hands trembling. Daniel, do you understand what this means? If we accept this inheritance, humanity will become the most advanced species in the galaxy. We will have technology that others cannot even imagine. I understand, Harris said quietly. But I also understand that we have to be careful. Power like this could destroy us as easily as it could save us. The sphere pulsed again. You are wise to be cautious, but you must decide soon. The inheritance will not wait forever. You have one cycle of your home star to make your choice. After that, this chamber will seal itself, and the inheritance will be lost. 1 year, Moore translated. We have 1 year to decide. Sphere's light began to fade, its colors growing dimmer. The voice spoke one last time, barely a whisper now. We have waited 12,000 years for you. Do not waste this chance. The fire is rare. The fire is precious. Use it well. And then there was silence. Harris stood in the fading light, staring at the throne. The weight of what had just happened pressed down on him like a physical force. Humanity had been chosen. Out of all the species in the galaxy, they had been selected to inherit the power of the most advanced civilization that had ever existed. We need to get back to the ship, he said finally. We need to report this to Earth. This decision is too big for us to make alone. Moore nodded slowly. She was still staring at the throne, her eyes filled with something between hope and fear. Everything changes now, she said softly. Whatever we decide, nothing will ever be the same. Harris turned and began walking back toward the passage. Behind him, the sphere glowed faintly in the darkness, waiting for the moment when someone would sit upon the throne and accept the gift of the Varanthi. The fire had been found. Now it needed someone brave enough to carry it. The news spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Within 1 week, every species in the consortium knew what had happened on Varanthos. The sealed chamber that had defeated their greatest scientists for thousands of years had opened for humans. The inheritance of the Varanthi, the most powerful technology in existence, was being offered to the youngest and most primitive species in the Alliance. The reaction was exactly what Daniel Harris had feared. Admiral Susan Price stood at the command center of the Endurance, reading the messages that flooded in from every corner of known space. She was a veteran of 30 years in the fleet, a woman who had survived wars and negotiations that would have broken lesser officers. But even she looked worried as she scrolled through the reports. The Thyrani are demanding an immediate investigation, she told Harris and Moore. They say we must have cheated somehow, that we tampered with the chamber or used some kind of trick. We did nothing of the kind, Moore protested. The door simply opened when I touched it. I do not even fully understand why. It does not matter what we did or did not do. Price set down her tablet and looked at them both. What matters is how the other species see this. For 10,000 years, they have believed they were the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. They discovered the ruins. They built the consortium. They made the rules. And now, a species that has only been in space for 3 centuries has been chosen to receive the greatest gift in history. She paused, her expression grim. They are not just angry. They are afraid. Harris had been thinking about this ever since they left the chamber. He understood the fear. If humanity gained the power of the Varanthi, the balance of the galaxy would change forever. The elder species would no longer be at the top. Everything they had built over thousands of years would become meaningless. What are they planning to do? He asked. Price looked out the window at the stars. The Consortium Council is meeting an emergency session. They are discussing whether to invoke Article 7. Moore gasped. Article 7. That is the war clause. They would actually consider military action against us. They are considering everything. Price turned back to face them. The Thyrani have already moved 3 battle fleets to the edge of the system. The Velox are calling for humanity to be expelled from the consortium entirely. Even the Kethari have broken their usual silence. Their ambassador sent a message saying that the inheritance must not be allowed to fall into the hands of a single species. Harris felt cold despite the warmth of the ship. He had known there would be consequences, but he had not expected things to move this fast. How long until they arrive? He asked. The main fleet will be here in 2 weeks, but their advanced ships are already in the system. Price walked to the tactical display and brought up a map. Red dots surrounded the planet, each one representing an alien vessel. We are outnumbered and outgunned. The Endurance is a research ship. We have enough weapons to fight off pirates, but nothing that could stand against a Therenia battlecruiser. Moore stepped forward, her face pale but determined. We cannot just surrender the inheritance. This is the most important discovery in human history. In the history of the entire galaxy, if we try to keep it, we might start a war that destroys everything. Price shook her head slowly. I have sent a message to Earth Command asking for guidance. But even if they send reinforcements, it will take months for them to arrive. We are on our own. The room fell silent. Harris stared at the tactical display, watching the red dots drift slowly around the planet. He thought about the throne chamber, about the sphere of light, and the voice that had spoken of fire. The Varanthi had chosen humanity because they did not accept limits, because they looked at the impossible and refused to give up. And suddenly, he had an idea. What if we do not fight them? He said. Price frowned. Explain. The consortium expects us to either surrender or resist. They have prepared for both options. Harris walked to the display and pointed at the formation of alien ships, but they have not prepared for a third choice, which is... Harris turned to face the Admiral. We invite them in. Price stared at him as if he had lost his mind. You want to invite the species who are threatening to attack us into the most powerful chamber in the galaxy? Yes. Harris kept his voice calm, even though his heart was pounding. Think about it. The Varanthi said the inheritance was meant for those who carry the fire. They said humanity was chosen because we do not accept limits. But they never said the inheritance had to belong to us alone. Moore's eyes widened. You want to share it? I want to offer to share it. The other species are afraid because they think we will use this power against them. They think we will become tyrants, the way any of them would if they had been chosen instead. Harris smiled slightly. But what if we prove them wrong? What if we show them that humans can be trusted with power by giving some of it away? Price was quiet for a long moment. She looked at the tactical display, then at the planet below, then back at Harris. It is a risk, she said finally. If they refuse, we will have shown weakness. They might attack anyway. They might, Harris agreed. But I do not think they will. The elder species have spent thousands of years competing with each other, fighting each other. They understand conflict, but they do not understand generosity. If we offer to share the inheritance freely, without asking for anything in return, it will confuse them. And while they are confused, we can talk. Then, slowly, she nodded. I will arrange a meeting with the consortium delegation. But Harris, if this goes wrong, it will be the end of everything we have worked for. I know. Harris looked out at the stars, at the alien ships waiting in the darkness. But sometimes you have to take a chance. That is what humans do. The meeting took place 3 days later aboard the Endurance. Ambassador Kreltheros of the Thyrny led the delegation. He was tall and thin, with angular features and cold eyes that seemed to calculate everything they looked at. Beside him walked High Priestess Veleneth of the Velox, her silver robes shimmering as she moved. The Kethareya had sent no representative, but their ships remained in formation outside, watching. You understand why we are here, Kreltheros said, as soon as he entered the conference room. His voice was flat and hard. The Varanthi inheritance cannot be allowed to fall into the hands of a single species. It must be controlled. I agree, Harris said. The ambassador stopped. His cold eyes narrowed with suspicion. You agree? The inheritance is too important to be claimed by any one species, including humanity. Harris gestured to the chairs around the table. Please sit. We have much to discuss. The aliens exchanged glances, clearly not expecting this response. Slowly, they took their seats. We propose a joint expedition, Harris continued. Representatives from every species in the consortium working together. When the time comes to claim the inheritance, we will do it as one. The knowledge will belong to everyone. Velenith leaned forward, her expression shifting from hostility to something almost like hope. You would truly share this with us? After everything we have said? After the threats we have made? We would. Harris met her gaze steadily. The Varanthi said humanity carries a fire that cannot be satisfied. Maybe they were right. But fire is not meant to be hoarded. It is meant to be passed on, to be shared. That is what makes it powerful. Kreltheros was silent for a long moment. His calculating eyes moved from Harris to Moore to Price, searching for any sign of deception.
Ow.
This is unexpected, he said finally. We will need to consult with our governments. Take all the time you need, Harris replied. But remember, the throne will only wait for 1 year. After that, the inheritance will be lost forever. For all of us. The ambassador rose from his chair. He looked at Harris with an expression that was hard to read. You are either very wise or very foolish, he said. I have not yet decided which. Harris smiled. Neither have I. The delegation left and the room fell silent. Moore turned to Harris with wonder in her eyes. Do you think they will accept? Harris looked out the window at the alien ships, their lights blinking in the darkness. I think, he said slowly, that we just changed the rules of the game. And now we have to wait and see how they decide to play. The joint expedition was assembled in 3 months. It was the largest gathering of different species in the history of the consortium. Ships from 12 worlds orbited Varanthos, their crews preparing for the descent into the throne chamber. Scientists and soldiers, priests and philosophers, all of them united by a single purpose, to claim the inheritance of the Varanthia together. Daniel Harris stood at the entrance to the chamber, watching as the delegates arrived. The Thyrani came first, their tall forms moving with precise efficiency. Then the Velox, their silver robes catching the violet light of the alien sky. The Kethri flickered in and out of visibility as they walked, existing only partially in the physical world. Behind them came representatives from 9 other species, each one different. Each one watching the others with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Catherine Moore walked beside Harris, her face showing both excitement and worry. I never thought I would see this, she said quietly. All of them, working together. It seemed impossible just a few months ago. A lot of impossible things have happened lately, Harris replied. He looked at the entrance to the chamber, at the darkness waiting below. I just hope this is not the last one. They descended into the passage together. The combined lights of 100 different devices pushed back the darkness, revealing the smooth black walls that had hidden the Varanthi's secrets for 12,000 years. No one spoke. The only sounds were footsteps and the quiet hum of alien technology. Harris walked at the front of the group. With Moore on one side and Ambassador Kreltheros on the other, the Thyrani had been the most difficult to convince. Even now, after months of negotiation, Harris could see the doubt in the ambassador's cold eyes. You truly believe this will work? Kreltheros asked, his voice barely above a whisper. That the Varanthi will accept all of us? I do not know what they will accept, Harris admitted. But I know what they were looking for. They wanted someone who would not give up. Someone who would try the impossible. I think sharing this inheritance is exactly the kind of impossible thing they hoped we would attempt. Kreltheros said nothing, but something in his expression shifted slightly. It was not quite agreement. It was no longer complete disbelief. The chamber opened before them. The throne sat at the center. Unchanged from when Harris had first seen it. The sphere of light floated above, its colors swirling in patterns that seemed to respond to the presence of so many different minds. The delegates spread out around the edges of the chamber, their eyes fixed on the glowing orb with expressions of wonder and fear. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the voice spoke. You have returned. And you have brought others. The words formed directly in every mind, translated perfectly into each species' language. Harris felt a ripple of shock pass through the crowd as beings who had never experienced telepathy suddenly heard thoughts that were not their own. We have, Harris said, stepping forward. We believe the inheritance should be shared. If humanity is to carry this gift, we do not want to carry it alone. The sphere pulsed slowly, considering. This was not our intention. The inheritance was designed for a single species. a single chosen heir, then changed the design. Harris walked closer to the throne, closer than anyone had dared to go before. He felt the heat of the sphere on his face, saw his own reflection in its shifting surface. You said humanity was chosen because we do not accept limits, because we look at the impossible and refuse to give up. Well, this is a limit, and we are refusing to accept it. The chamber was absolutely silent. Every delegate stood frozen, watching the sphere, waiting for its response. For what felt like an eternity, nothing happened. Then the sphere began to change. Its light split into dozens of smaller orbs, each one drifting away from the center and floating toward a different delegate. Harris watched as one of the lights approached Ambassador Krell Theros, hovering in front of his face like a curious child. Another drifted toward High Priestess Velenith, another toward the flickering form of the Ketheri representative. You ask us to do something that has never been done, the voice said, now coming from everywhere at once. To divide the inheritance among many, to trust that cooperation will succeed where singular purpose was intended. Yes, Harris said. Why should we agree? Harris thought carefully before answering. He thought about everything he had learned since arriving on Varanthos. The history of the consortium, the wars and treaties, the thousands of years of competition and conflict that had defined the relationships between species. Because you were like us once, he said finally. You told us that. You carried the same fire. You looked at the universe and wanted more than you had. He paused, searching for the right words. I think you hoped we would do exactly this. You did not just want to find a worthy heir. You wanted to find someone who could do what you never managed to do. The lights drifted slowly around the chamber, touching delegate after delegate with their warm glow. You wanted to prove that the fire does not have to burn alone, Harris continued, that it can be shared without being diminished, that the impossible can become possible if enough beings are willing to try. The sphere above the throne began to descend. It moved slowly, majestically, lowering itself until it was level with Harris's eyes. The lights that had spread throughout the chamber flowed back toward it, merging with its surface until it glowed brighter than ever before. You speak truly, the voice said, and there was something new in it now. Something that might have been hope. We failed at this, in our time. We grew too proud, too certain of our own power. We believed we had to transcend alone, that our fire was too precious to share. The light grew brighter still, but you have shown us another way, a better way. Perhaps this was what we were truly waiting for, all these long years. Not a worthy heir, but a worthy family. The sphere exploded. Not violently, but gently, like a flower opening. Its light shattered into 1,000 fragments, each one seeking out a different delegate, pressing against their foreheads with gentle warmth. Harris felt one touch his own mind, and for a moment he saw everything. The rise of the Varanthi, their golden age of discovery, the machines they built that could bend space and time, their exploration of every corner of the universe, and finally, their transcendence, their departure from physical existence into something greater. But he also saw their regret. The Varanthi had achieved everything they had ever dreamed of, but they had done it alone. They had never learned to share their fire with others. They had never built the kind of community that Harris was building now, a species who had been enemies working together toward a common goal. That was their one failure. The one thing they wished they had done differently. And now, through humanity, they had a chance to make it right. The light faded, and Harris found himself standing in the chamber, surrounded by beings who were no longer strangers. He could feel their presence in his mind, faint but real. Not their thoughts exactly, but their essence, their hopes and fears and dreams. He understood them in a way that words could never have accomplished. He looked at Ambassador Krell Theros and saw tears running down the Thyrani's angular face. He looked at High Priestess Velenith and saw her smiling with pure joy. Even the Ketheri had solidified completely, their flickering form now steady and present. It is done, Moore whispered beside him. Her voice was filled with wonder. The inheritance has been divided among all of us. Every species, every delegate, Harris nodded slowly. He felt different now, fuller, as if a part of him that had always been empty had finally been filled. Not divided, he said. Shared, there is a difference. He looked around the chamber at the faces of beings from a dozen different worlds. They had come here as rivals, as enemies, as strangers, but they would leave as something new. Something the galaxy had never seen before. A family, the Varanthi had finally gotten their wish, and humanity had given it to them. Years had passed since the day the inheritance was shared. The galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. Where there had once been suspicion and rivalry between species, there was now cooperation and trust. The knowledge of the Varanthi had spread to every corner of known space, lifting all civilizations to heights they had never imagined. Diseases that had plagued worlds for millennia were cured. Energy became unlimited. The secrets of the universe unfolded like a book being opened for the first time. But the greatest change was not in technology. It was in the hearts of the beings who had received the inheritance. Catherine Moore sat in a hover chair at the center of the memorial plaza on Varanthos. She was 93 years old now, her hair completely white, her body frail. But her eyes were still sharp, still filled with the same curiosity that had driven her to spend her life studying the Varanthi. She had been asked to speak at the centennial celebration, and she had agreed, even though the journey from Earth had taken everything she had left around her. Thousands of beings from dozens of species had gathered. Humans and Thyrany stood side by side. Velix priests laughed with Ketheri philosophers. Children of species that had once been enemies played together in the violet light of the alien sky. The memorial itself was built where the throne chamber had once been sealed. The black dome had been dismantled long ago. Its material reshaped into a monument that listed the names of every delegate who had been present on the day of the sharing. At the very top, carved in letters of light that could be seen from orbit, was a single phrase: "The fire belongs to all." Moore looked at the words for a long moment. Then she turned to face the crowd. 100 years ago, she began, her voice amplified by the speakers that surrounded the plaza, a small group of humans came to this world. We were young. We were foolish. We had only been traveling among the stars for a few centuries, while the other species here had been doing so for thousands of years. By any measure, we had no right to be chosen for the greatest gift in history. She paused, letting her words settle over the crowd. But the Varanthi did not choose us for our wisdom or our power. They chose us because we carried a fire that would not go out. A fire that refused to accept limits. A fire that looked at the impossible and said, "Why not?" In the front row, she could see Daniel Harris. He was an old man now, just like her, his hair gray, and his face lined with the marks of a long life. But he was smiling. It's the same quiet smile she remembered from the day they had first descended into the throne chamber together. When the inheritance was offered to us, Moore continued, we could have taken it for ourselves. We could have used it to become the most powerful species in the galaxy. The Varanthi would not have stopped us. That was our choice to make. She shook her head slowly. But that was not who we were. That was not who we wanted to be. Daniel Harris, who led our expedition, understood something that the Varanthi themselves had never grasped. He understood that fire is not meant to be hoarded. It is meant to be shared. It is meant to light other fires, to spread warmth to those who are cold, to illuminate the darkness for those who cannot see. She gestured at the crowd around her. Look at what we have built together. Look at what we have become. 100 years ago, the species of this galaxy were divided by fear and suspicion. We competed with each other. We fought with each other. We could barely sit in the same room without arguing. Few beings in the crowd laughed softly, remembering. But now we are a family. We share knowledge freely. We help each other grow. When one species faces a problem, all the others come together to solve it. The wars that once seemed endless have become memories. The borders that once separated us have become meaningless. Moore leaned forward in her chair. This is the true inheritance of the Varanthi. Not the technology. Not the power. The understanding that we are stronger together than we could ever be apart. The knowledge that the fire burns brightest when it is shared. She looked at Harris, and he nodded slowly. Daniel Harris is the reason we are all here today, she said. He is the one who had the courage to offer friendship when everyone expected conflict. He is the one who proved that humans could be trusted with power by giving that power away. He is the reason the galaxy changed. Harris raised his hand, waving off the praise with the same quiet modesty he had always shown. But more was not finished. But Daniel would be the first to tell you that he did not do this alone. Every human who came to Varanthos played a part. Every delegate who accepted our offer played a part. Every being who chose to trust instead of fear played a part. She smiled, and for a moment she looked young again. That is what it means to be part of this family. Not to be the greatest, not to be the most powerful, but to be willing to share, to be willing to trust, to be willing to pass the fire on to others. Knowing that it will only grow brighter for having been given away, she turned to look at the memorial one last time. The Varanthi waited 12,000 years for someone to claim their inheritance. They thought they were looking for a worthy heir, but what they were really looking for was someone who would prove that their greatest failure could be undone. Someone who would show that the fire does not have to burn alone. Her voice grew soft. Humanity gave them that gift, and in doing so, we discovered something about ourselves. We discovered that our greatest strength was not our stubbornness or our refusal to give up. It was our ability to see the best in others, even when they could not see it in themselves. Our ability to offer friendship to strangers. Our ability to turn enemies into family. She closed her eyes. The Varanthi are gone now. They transcended to a place beyond our understanding. But I like to think they are watching us. I like to think they are proud of what we have accomplished. And I like to think they are grateful. She opened her eyes and looked out at the sea of faces before her. The fire belongs to all of us now. Let us carry it together. Let us pass it on to our children and to our children's children. Let us make sure that no matter how far we travel or how much we learn, we never forget the lesson that humanity taught the galaxy 100 years ago. She took a deep breath. The fire burns brightest when it is shared, and love, true love, is not diminished by being given away. It only grows. The plaza was silent for a long moment. Then, from somewhere in the back, a single pair of hands began to clap. Others joined. The applause spread like ripples in water, growing and growing until it filled the entire plaza, until it echoed off the crystal spires of Ethon and rose toward the violet sky. Moore sat back in her chair and let the sound wash over her. She felt Harris take her hand and squeeze it gently. "I did good," he said quietly. She nodded. Two moved to speak above them in the letters of light carved at the top of the memorial. The words gleamed against the alien sky. The fire belongs to all, and in the hearts of every being gathered there. In the bonds of trust and friendship that connected 100 different species, the fire burned on bright, warm, eternal, exactly as the Varanthi had hoped it would, exactly as humanity had promised it would be. The end.